Anyone who has ever played an extraction shooter, be it Escape from Tarkov, Arena Breakout Infinite, Crazon Warfare, Hunt Showdown, or any other, is familiar, maybe even intimate, with gear fear. That deep, unexplainable dread of losing a digital item in a video game. But why? Why do we care so much about a few pixels on our screen, to the point where we're terrified of losing them, even though we can earn them back later? To answer this question, we will go back and look at our ancestors, specifically those who lived in what is known as the Lower Paleolithic. This is where we will find the earliest evidence of stone tool production and use by hominids, about 3.3 million years ago. Our ancestors both lived and died by these tools, and the case is no different regardless of what time period we look at. As such, the idea of keeping these valuable tools either close by or somewhere safe was engraved early on in our psyche. What is here referred to as tools can really be anything. To a hunter, this can be their bow and arrow, a knife, a spear, or something similar. To a farmer, this can be their hoe. To a ruler, it can be their army. And to an extraction shooter player, this is most certainly their high-tier loot, be it armor, weapons, or consumables. This may explain gear fear in real life. However, how come our psyche can't differentiate real life from pixels on the screen? The answer is that it can. It just needs to learn how to. When we get immersed in the world of video games, the line between what is real and what is on the screen becomes blurred, and the more we focus on the game, the murkier this line becomes. So the solution sounds simple, right? All we need to do, in theory, is to teach our psyche how to differentiate what is real as opposed to what is not. However, that is easier said than done. Sure, you could definitely enter a Tarkov raid with your most valuable gun, and get killed on purpose over and over and over again until dying becomes your second nature. But that can be very demotivating, and most people won't bother fully committing to that method and going through with it, or will attempt it, won't see immediate results, and simply get pissed because, in their eyes and at that moment, they wasted something extremely valuable. Alternatively, you can just keep playing the game as you would normally, occasionally dying, and eventually you will get used to it and become confident with bringing in higher tier equipment. But it usually takes a lot of time and, again, persistence. To someone who has never played an extraction shooter or lost a very valuable item, this level of connection to what is essentially a bunch of pixels on the screen may be weird, comical even. But to anyone who has experienced dying with a valuable item on them firsthand, well, they know how big of a gut punch it is, even if only at the moment. And that is why the aforementioned two methods simply aren't effective for the vast majority of people. Try taking one gut punch after another and see how long you'll last. That is why I decided to make this video and show you all what helped me get over my gear fear, which, when you hear it, you will probably think, well, isn't that obvious? For a bit of backstory, my first extraction shooter was Escape from Tarkov. When I started, I experienced what pretty much everyone goes through, gear fear, the topic of this video. Because I just started playing, no matter what I brought in, I could not compete with other, more experienced players. And I would die time and again. Eventually, I got tired of losing what I considered to be good gear, and so I opted for going into raids with minimal loot, which put me in an even bigger of a disadvantage. So I just rushed through a route I knew not many people went through, and extracted as quickly as possible. This obviously prevented me from ever improving, and after some time, I just got bored of the game. Fast forward a few years, and extraction shooters started becoming ever more prevalent in mainstream media. I heard about a game called Crazon Warfare, which will feature a PvE mode. I thought to myself, well, this is amazing. I'll get to hone my skills without the worry of being clapped by someone who plays the game 8 hours a day, every day. So I bought the game basically as it was released, booted it up, entered a PvE server, and was pumped to finally be able to experience an extraction shooter at my pace. Little did I know that the fact that the server was PvE didn't matter at all. because I was still, and I say this literally, physically shaking from my anxiety that I would lose the gear that I had. I tried brute forcing my way through this anxiety, but would always just end up either rage quitting or just getting bored. Maybe extraction shooters just aren't for me? Either way, I felt disappointed, and so I made the final decision to quit. About a year later, something sparked in me. I got that extraction shooter itch again. I thought about it, and I realized the issue wasn't PvP or PvE, neither were the tryhards, nor the game itself. The issue was that when I played Tarkov, I ingrained into my mind the mindset high tier gear equals death. But what I should have ingrained was high tier gear equals death, low tier gear equals death, skill issue equals death. In other words, I kept associating my deaths with the gear I was bringing in, thinking that if I brought in something of lesser value, I would somehow survive. Don't know what my logic there was, or at least wouldn't cry as much, and not the fact I was still new and learning, while completely ignoring the fact that bringing in low tier gear won't help me, and will only worsen my situation. With that enlightenment in mind, I decided to jump back into Grey Zone Warfare. Now, finally, the part you've all been waiting for. Instead of looking at it from a black and white angle, look at it with a bit of nuance. Don't go into a raid naked, but also don't go fully kitted out. Find a balance. What I did was just use the beginner loadout the game prepared for me for the first few raids that I did, until I learned the controls, the map, the AI, etc. Then, when I felt comfortable with that loadout, I added a silencer to my rifle. That's not a big upgrade, but that's the point. You can upgrade your loadout any way you like, be it a better helmet, a better backpack, a sidearm, a better primary, better ammunition, it really doesn't matter, as long as you only do one at a time. Then, when you get comfortable with that upgrade, move up a notch again, and repeat that process until you're comfortable with bringing whatever loadout you feel like it. Or in other words, until you could not care less whether you lived or died, and it was all fun and games again, as it should be. Disconnect that engraved survival instinct of real life from the game. Yes, this will take time, and it's stupidly obvious when presented like this, but most people dismiss this way because, again, they don't want to be seen as slow or cowardly, so they do the all or nothing approach. Alternatively, they listen to advice from the most dedicated of players who truly can take one gut punch after another and not lose their motivation. Basically, this way, when you do eventually die, it won't feel as much of a loss compared to what you had previously, because the upgrade wasn't that big, and even less so if you died once or twice with that previous loadout too. If you're having trouble committing to the method, well, think of it this way. I have this really good and really expensive rifle in my stash. What happens if I use it? Yes, I might die. Yes, I will probably die, but at least I will get to use it before I die. Probably. What happens if I just leave it in my stash? It will just sit there, take up space, it won't get used, and eventually it will just get wiped when the server decides to wipe. So basically, however you look at it, you will lose that rifle at one point or the other. The only question is whether you'll get to enjoy it before you do lose it. That's a massive contrast to playing naked with only a secondary, to trying out a fully kitted loadout and immediately dying with it because you don't know how to utilize it, which is also another benefit of this approach. You gradually learn how to utilize each part of your loadout as you go on its own, as opposed to having to learn it all at once, which would be the case if you did the all or nothing method. Think of it as going down one step as opposed to rolling down the entire staircase, when you die of course. And that's basically it, simple as that. Now, I think it's also worth mentioning that there is no one-size-fits-all method to overcoming gear fear. Everyone is different, and as such, what worked for me might not work for you. Claiming otherwise would be the equivalent of selling snake oil. Nevertheless, I recommend you try this approach if you still struggle with gear fear, even after trying to brute force your way through it until it clicked, and see how you do. If you do, I hope it helped you, And if you did, please leave a like, comment, and share the video with others who might struggle with the same. And if it tickles your fancy, subscribe to my channel. It would really mean a lot to me and I would highly appreciate if you did. Until next time, cheers.